All right. Well, we're really happy to be here sharing with you today. I'm Vondie Lozano, and we have with us Diana and Claudia and Sakura. And I'm just going to share a little bit to get us started about soul groups and soulmates. And then they will join in the discussion. And then we have some questions. And we're just really looking forward to sharing with you. So I know many of you have read Michael Newton's books, but just a little quick recap that our soul group is basically our soul family. They're that special place that souls can't wait to go to when they have their life between life sessions. Michael said they can be 3 to 25 people, souls, beings. My experiences are usually around 10 or 12, but sometimes less. And at any given time in the session, sometimes people, different souls step forward, so they don't all connect all the time, but we often arrange them as a clock, just so we can say who's approaching you first. Are they from 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock? Just so we can kind of keep straight who's who. And then while they're introducing themselves, we get to find out who were they in the last life. And the really interesting part is who are they in their current life. And sometimes there's a special message or a special bond, but this is definitely one of the highlights when people do their life between life sessions. So there's different characteristics of different groups. The fun part is it's not all angels and fairy dust. We have personalities over there. Our guides have personalities. Our council has personality. But I've seen groups where they're young souls, mischievous souls, silly, playful groups that don't take things very seriously and kind of play jokes on other souls in other groups. I've seen very advanced soul groups. The most interesting one was a group where I couldn't figure out who the soul group was at first. She kept speaking as we, and I asked what some groups come together as work groups. And so I asked, well, what do you do? And she said, well, other souls come to us and we help them plan their lives. And I finally realized this soul group was a council. But and the group, the guide actually said, put that book away. Like those, you're not going to find any questions that relate to this soul there. So I've seen very advanced groups where they're creating energy and doing other things. And then one of the other most interesting ones I've seen was a kind of a rogue soul group. And the souls had names like Hell Yeah and Roger That and Come Here. And the soul that was called Come Here was like a wayward soul. And when she crossed over, and I was like, this is not in the books. When she crossed over, her guide was mad at her and told her she needed to go right into another life because she had just wasted that life. And I thought they were playing a joke on me. And eventually the session softened and she was given a very loving message. But when she went to her soul group, they were like smoking, drinking, hell-raising souls. So to me, it's very exciting and fun to realize we have unique personalities. And along with that, we have unique special relationships in our soul groups, which brings me to soulmates. And not everybody returns to their soul group in their session. And you can have more than one LBL session, but people often go to their soul group. But I was going to say, and not everybody has a soulmate, or if they do, it doesn't always come up in any particular session. But oftentimes there is one special soul that we incarnate with over and over. And I've even seen it where the person I was doing the session for didn't have a soulmate, but she referred to 2 other souls that were sort of like thick as thieves. And she said they were soulmates and they kind of did all their lives together. So it's not always romantic. Sometimes it can be a close friend or a dear family member. One of my most memorable sessions, the soul connected with someone who was his cousin in this life. And he said, I'm trying to slow myself down here. He said, we had both been out for a long time. They met in a tropical bar, like a cafe with all their souls sitting around kind of drinking and chatting. And he said, we had both been out a long time, so living lives. And they were catching up and replaying lives and what they had done and what they could have done differently. And he said, it feels like we've done this 1,000 times. And they probably had. And the other thing he said when he rejoined his soul group was he said, it feels like home. And that's always an emotional moment. And he said, it feels more like home than anything I've ever known on earth. And that still kind of touches me, that it's just such a special bond with the group and then with the soulmate in particular. And one special romantic soul bond that I remember, soulmates, is Lauren. And actually she met her soulmate when she crossed over from her past life session. So the way it works is you do a past life session, and then you cross over and usually meet your guide. And then your second session is a life between life session. So the first one is sort of like preparing the way. And in the very first session, well, let me back up. And in the second session, you do your immediate past life, and then you cross over. So we're exploring the time before you came into this life, before you're now you. But anyway, after her first past life session, she crossed over, and that's when their guide usually shows up. And your guide has been with you from the time your soul was created through all your lives. And when I said, who is here? Or I asked her to describe her guide. What is she noticing about this being, their appearance and their energy? And she burst into tears and she said, it is so clearly my husband. And this is the only time I've had the partner show up at that time. And when I asked him, the guide, well, her husband, the soulmate, what is your relationship to this soul? He said, I am this soul. I am this soul. And she said they were like two halves of a whole. And she said they were sitting like on a bench, I think. But the important part was their foreheads were touching. And she said, if you could see them, their bodies were making like a heart. And they just had such a deep connection that they spoke as one person. And so that was the one that kind of stood out to me the most. But again, it can be a romantic partner. It can be a friend, family. Michael Newton and his wife, Peggy, were clearly soulmates. He speaks of her that way. When I did a past life session for my husband, we were farmers in Poland, and he's my soulmate. I told him, please don't wait so long next time to find me, because we met kind of late in life. Oh, and then I also wanted to mention that it's not always a positive relationship. This came up in one of the questions. So sometimes people's ex-husband will be in their soul group to their surprise, or friends that they do not care for at all. It's always kind of a shock to people. And so sometimes it'll be like, we decided beforehand, kind of soul contracts, I'm going to be the good guy and you're going to be the bad guy. And we are going to learn these specific lessons. And that's why we're choosing to do it this way. So it's, again, it's often romantic, but a soulmate can be a friend, a family member, and it isn't always positive, but most of the time, I think it is. Oh, and then one other quick example, and then I want to open it up to the group, is I did a session where the woman realized that her soulmate in the group is her now husband. And she also burst into tears. The sessions can often be emotional. Sometimes it's delight emotion, and sometimes there's some sadness, some pain. And she realized that she had hurt him in a past life. And the goal of that life was to be strong, but she said she had gotten carried away. And so the goal in this life was to have a balance. And she said to focus on pure love. So our soulmates, our soul groups, we incarnate together to support each other, to be there for each other, and to learn and accomplish whatever it is we want to do together. Oh, and I always say it's like a repertory group, a theater group, where it's the same group, but you change up roles each time, depending on what play you're putting on. Well, we change up roles depending on what lessons we want to learn and what we're here for in this particular life. So I think that's most of what I wanted to mention to get us started. So now I would like to open it up to the group and hear from some of the rest of you about anything you would like to add or share or anything you'd like to comment on.
One of the questions that I'm always asked is about relationships with parents and whether parents are in your soul group. My experience has been that they are souls who have a contract with us, and they may or may not be in soul groups. And I'm wondering what your experiences are.
I've had so many descriptions as soulmates that are like a mother-daughter, and or father-son, and they keep reversing roles, changing roles, but over and over again, they come together. And one in particular had such a, it was not a smooth relationship. And there was, love, hate, arguing and coming together again. But they knew during the session, when you're in that wiser part of your consciousness, when you're able to reach up into that higher part of yourself, you're able to retrieve clarity on why you're together and what you're supposed to be learning from each other. And that, anyway, I found a lot of relationship with that isn't a romantic partners. It's more nurturing and, mother, daughter, whatever. So that's interesting. And the soulmates that are really close, you often wonder how they manage to do their learning in this earth plane when they come in so attached to each other. There is, there's not much individual action, and how one pulls the other back or supports the other. And it's very interesting to approach that and working on to learn. So, yeah.
I think that's an interesting concept, that back and forth, and how soulmates, Michael talks about this, that sometimes your soulmate may not stay with you in a life because there are lessons that you need to learn on your own. And especially when you have someone whose spouse has died early, died young, and trying to understand why this happened, what the contract was, what the agreement was. And they said, this is my soulmate, and why did he have to leave me? And then learning that there were lessons that were on her path or his path that needed to be learned. And if the soulmate is there to support, help, carry, then the lesson may not be learned to its fullest. And so there can be sadness, because you lose grief, because you lose a partner that's your soulmate. And yet it isn't that you didn't plan that. And people think that because there's sadness, there's no planning. Oh, that shouldn't have happened. He died too young. He's my soulmate. He should be here with me. And yet it isn't something that is random. It is something that can be chosen. And it can be very sad and very painful in the process. And part of the journey is the learning that comes from the experience.
Well, this is it, isn't it? When they are able to get into those feelings and allow those feelings of sadness to come up, and then honor them, and what they're supposed to be teaching and that soul, and how they can learn from it and grow from it, and find a sense of peace because they chose it in order to work through something. So yeah, that's a good point, Diana.
Yeah, I want to add something to that. So some people feel like it's punishment that they have to say goodbye to a loved one, right? And then when they experience life between lives and then meeting their soul group, and it was nothing like that at all. Like it was like you plan it too with the guide and then the other person, and then the entire soul group is contributing to that too. And that kind of, I think it is difficult to comprehend that level of meaning of relationship when you're just living a normal life. But life between lives and past life regression kind of helps to see relationship differently.
I was going to say, I've seen a fair number of parents and children in each other's soul groups. Even though Michael says that it doesn't usually happen that way. And I think the thinking traditionally was we choose a specific family for a specific reason and specific lessons in that life. But I've had, especially recently, parents and children in the soul group. And not necessarily as soulmates, but sometimes. And then this kind of brings me to another question, as people asked about grandchildren and grandparents. And I've seen grandparents show up quite frequently as guides, and sometimes in the group, but as guides. And I've had a couple of sessions where people's grandchildren, they were told that part of their job in this life was to to sort of nurture this very special grandchild who has come in with a lot of gifts and knowing, and part of their role as their grandparent is to almost be their guide here on earth, or a guide of sorts. Have you guys had experience with that, the grandparents and grandchildren?
Yeah. I mean, I recently had someone whose grandmother was the first guide that she encountered. She had other guides, but that was the first one who welcomed her home. And it makes a very easy transition when it's someone that you know in this life and that you have a loving relationship with as a child, that it can simplify coming home because there's someone you recognize.
Right.
So I find that it's the recognition factor as much as anything.
Right. I had a grandmother that had a grandson with a severe disability, and one that he could leave at any moment. And during the session, she really got why he picked the family he picked, because she would be able to hold the space for him and support him in his experience on this earth. And the whole dynamics between them just blossomed. She felt so, she just thought of him as so precious, and realized her responsibility was a lot bigger than she thought it would be. It was pretty cool, yeah. And they were both alive, nobody was in the spirit world yet, but the souls, they recognized that, she was recognizing that soul connection. It was lovely.
So someone said recognize. One of the other questions people had is, how do you recognize your soul group and your soul mates? And, in the life planning station, they talk about red flags and other ways. And I was even looking through Michael's book last night, and he said, it was a story where he said he would recognize his wife's laugh. It was like I want to say like jingle bells or a tinkling sound or something like that. But have you guys encountered anything like that with your people?
Yeah, I actually had a lady just not too long ago who went to like her first incarnation, and she recalled the planet Arcturus. And during the session, she recognized that there are people in her life today who she feels very close to. She didn't meet them until later in life, but they were also from this planet. They had this connection, this root connection. And that thinking back on other lifetimes, how they showed up in other lifetimes together, that in groups. And the other client I wanted to share with you on soul groups was someone who, when they initially had a picture of it during the past life, they saw themselves in an old castle during a ceremony. And it was the flag they described was a cathar. They were one of the cathars. And then when we got into the spirit world, looking back on all the lifetimes, it was very clear in that moment that the group, she had a spiritual learning development group that she was a member of in this time and space, but she was given flashes of many, many different lifetimes, incarnating over and over as a monk, as a nun, all of these different disciplines. Now, one of her issues that she came with was sexuality. And during this time in the life between lives, she was able to understand that this soul group, she would join these soul groups that were working on discipline. And often they were very celibate. So we really got into that, being what she chose in this life and how she might find balance with that and be more open with it. It was a real interesting exploration to the idea of incarnating over and over with this same group that have the same intention or the same focus of learning. So that's what I wanted to share.
I've had an interesting soul group with someone who, as she looked around her soul group, she saw most of them were in human-like form or had a human outline. And then there was one who was sort of human, but also cat-like. And after we had done some work with the council, what we did, she said, I want to go back and I want to talk to that one. I want to know more. And so she went back and talked to that member. And as she talked to her, she was transported to the planet that being was from. And this was a being, a planet where every being on the planet was telepathically connected to the planet. And it was loving energy and it was healing energy. And in this current lifetime, she's a yoga master, she's a Reiki master, she's into body work and energy. And she's also had rather unusual interactions in relationships, that she's been in triads, that she's been testing things out because things don't feel quite right. And so as she was interacting with people on that planet or beings on that planet, she's realizing that the people in this lifetime that she relates to, she has a similar feeling as she did on that planet. And so when someone has the same kind of energy or energetic connection, she feels close to them. And if they don't, she doesn't. And it's kind of that intangible about, what is it about this person? I like them, but I don't feel connected. And she realized that time, the millennia that she spent on that planet, had conditioned her to understanding and feeling what loving connection is. And when she is in relationship with someone who doesn't express or feel in that way, she doesn't feel the closeness and starts to leave it because she isn't getting what she needs. And she still has that same sensation in her being, but this being was one of her soul group. And by looking at the soul group, they may not all be human. They may not all, there are people who talk about their animals being part of their soul group. One cannot necessarily tell in a soul group just by looking at them. What I found is that your soul group members appear in a form that is comfortable for you, not necessarily in their true energetic forms. And so, is it your dog that you just lost? Well, maybe your dog you just lost is a member of your soul group that came in is actually an energetic form in your soul group. So I don't discount what people are reporting. I think people really do have deep connections in ways that we don't know and that we don't necessarily understand. And a lot of it may be conditioned by their past experience and how they connect with others and how their energies, how they've learned what they've learned.
I was going to say, I did a session once where someone was especially close to their animals. And that was part of what brought me to this work, actually, was a loss of a pet. And he asked about his dogs, and he was told they're souls just like we are. and they didn't exist in his soul group per se. I know Michael talked about they kind of exist in a separate realm, but we can invite them and they can come if they want. But he was given the information that they are souls, just like we are.
I had someone who had a cat. The cat's name was Thor, and the cat had disappeared. And so while she was between lives, she decided she would ask Thor where he was, and how he's doing. And he goes, "I'm fine. I just, got bored. And so I left. You don't have to worry about me." And it was interesting, about 2 weeks later, her grandson found that it put out an ad on Craigslist or something, and found the cat was there and was ready to come home and just reincorporated into home. But Thor said, "You don't have to worry about me. I'll come home when I feel like it. I'll let you find me when I'm ready." And I thought that was really interesting, how on a soul level, we definitely, whether they're in our soul group or not, we definitely can communicate, just like we can with people who are alive. The soul energy is infinite. And so we have that ability to connect.
I was going to say something else about the recognition factor. I like that Michael Newton talks about soulmates and that kind of deep bond, but he separates it out from what I would call kind of Hollywood lust mates, that it's really kind of a deeper, richer being drawn to someone, that sense of home, than what we would associate as just kind of, like I said, kind of Hollywood chemistry, that there's some health to it for the most part. Was somebody else going to say something? Claudia, you look very pensive.
I absolutely agree. And when people have these experiences, they are their experiences, and they might be looking, is that a valid experience? Because I haven't read about it, or it's not in the book. But each person will have their own unique experience. The things that Michael Newton gave us are guideposts, to help facilitate and open people's awareness up. But I love it that, that people will just, I want to go find out about the cat, and, that's beautiful. We have to be careful to allow people to have the experiences that their higher self seeks, right? And support that process. And I think I have to say that the way the Newton Institute is set up, we've all been trained to hold space and keep space open for that. So that's all I wanted to say.
Well, and one of the questions was, are the soul groups changing? Are they evolving? And we know that that's one of the things from our training, is we were told when Sakura and I were doing our training about 5 years ago, that we have these specific kind of stations that we, we were trained, you need to hit so many of these in our certification sessions. But we were told also that right at that time, things were changing up, and the sessions were no longer following like a specific pattern. They're kind of going all different places. And so I think that's a good point, Claudia, is that we were sort of trained a certain way, but we were also trained that we're kind of having to be flexible and open, because spirit is moving and changing and things are evolving.
I think one of the things that I find with people who've read Michael's books is they resonate with the overall feeling of them, but the world has changed in the last 30 years. And how people process and what they know and how they connect may be different. And so we are tracking our clients and supporting them in their journeys, which may or may not look closely like the ones in the books. And that may feel very real to the clients, but not resemble the exact path that someone did in the books. And that makes sense, because Michael was a pioneer and he was recording what he was observing, and we're observing other things in our clients now. I see more people moving from their initial soul group that they start at the time that their soul is born into specialized groups, whether it is because they're training or because of what they're doing or how they are of service or what work they're doing now or what they're studying. And I see that many people have a specialized group in addition to the basic soul group. I had one man who, when he went and visited a soul group, there were a couple of people standing around. I mean, he goes, this room is empty. There's like a couple of guys here. And when he got to his council, they were saying, they were really joking with him and saying, boy, we're really happy to see that you're actually here and doing some work, because we were wondering if you're ever going to get going. And they're just really rousing him. And they were then giving him credit for the work he's doing in this lifetime. But people move at their own speed. Because we have free will, we can choose how quickly or how slowly we choose to work. And in his basic soul group, as he went and looked at it again, he saw that most of his soul group had advanced into other directions because they had moved. And he was still connected with those who he was interacting with, but he was finding that many of the people he was connected with met in other groups. So in specialized groups of teachers and those who were becoming guides and those who had other work on this planet or on the soul level. And so there is the stability in who we come into soulness with when we're born. And we have stability with a guide from that point. But we are individual souls in our soul group, and each one progresses at the speed that it does. And we have choice about who we interact with and who we have contracts with and who we do work with. And I think that we don't always come together with all of the people who are in our pod. We can, have the same wife, the same husband, the same children. That can happen for several lifetimes. And they seem to, in my experience, has been that they tend to work in a routine for a while, and then they switch because it takes a while. We don't learn everything in a single lifetime. We learn slowly. And so we may have to go through several lifetimes with the same configuration in order for each soul to reach what they need. So it isn't random, and it is something that you plan as a soul. It isn't done to you. You're choosing who you're setting contracts with and how your work is being laid out. And I find that fascinating to be able to participate and facilitate.
I was going to jump in, but were you going to say something, Claudia? I can't hear you.
Yes, I wanted to share. I had a lady describe this. We go to the soul group, and she talks about them being a particular ray. They are and it was like she described, I think, aqua, but It was like a cone. So the way she described it is everyone was in a circle, and the color ray went up like an ice cream cone to the point. And the colors got more intense. And she was describing, as these people in her soul group evolved, the color ray was more intense. Mm-hmm. And it was as it went up the spectrum. It was really interesting. Yeah, it was cool. Sorry. So that's great.
And I just realized I wasn't muted, so you can hear me going, mm-hmm. Well, and actually that was something I forgot to say in the beginning, which is we have different personalities within our groups. And we also usually get to find out what our colors are. And as we know, the lighter tends to be newer, younger souls, deeper, richer, bluer, purples tend to be the more advanced souls. So there is color and levels, but not hierarchy, which is hard for us to understand. But the part that I was going to add too was that they take place in different places. And Diana was alluding to this. They have different personalities. So that's probably my favorite part when I learned all this was, one soul can be that I had one that was the very sensitive soul. And then and they'll kind of sometimes rib each other, like rib the sensitive soul. And then, but not in a mean way. And then there was, like a teacher soul, and this is in one group, or a joker soul. So I've seen different groups have characteristics, and within groups, there are different sort of personality types. And some can be a little rough, not rough as in aggressive, but rough as in kind of rough and tumble a little bit. But to me, it's just fascinating that we can have these different characteristics. Oh, and then I was going to say places. I've seen some that were just orbs in space. Some, more often, they meet in what we would think of as an Earth-like place, like alongside a river, or the rogue group was in a pub with a fireplace, or the tropical cafe. And when you said the ray color, I've seen this in our workplace groups. Some people have been posting about this, the blue souls. I had someone from the blue planet, and was the ray color blue? Aqua, yeah. That they were kind of an aqua blue. And one of the questions was, when you come from another planet, are you more likely to come alone as opposed to bringing your soul group? And so this person that I saw from the aqua planet was alone, though her grandson was special. And I don't know if he was in her soul group. I think he might have been. But anyway, I've seen and heard of other people with souls from the aqua planet. And my experience was they were mostly here, not with, like, their whole soul group hadn't incarnated with them. But I don't know if anybody else has any experience with the souls when they come from another planet. Oh, except I did want to say the person on the council, they, and I have seen this with the higher souls, this is when they said, put the book away, that won't help you, because they said that soul did not incarnate for her own development. And I've seen this a couple times with advanced souls. The whole council had incarnated among us, kind of spread out, like they weren't necessarily in her life, but spread out on the earth to bring us up, for our healing and raising our vibration.
I have heard of people coming from other planets and not knowing others, but knowing that others are present on the earth at the same time. That they're not, that they can feel the vibration of others in their soul group because of their connections from the other planet, but they don't necessarily know them or have a relationship with them. I haven't heard of souls coming where they are necessarily partnered or know somebody intimately close in, but they may be aware. And once they start to learn characteristics of their soul as a result of these journeys, that then they begin to identify characteristics in others that they start to then recognize as being from their soul group. Because they are sensitized, they're more aware. So once we get that knowing, then we are more aware, and our intuition, it has been stimulated by that knowing. But it may not be something that when you start on these journeys that you have any awareness of, because you don't have the sensitivity to it. And that's part of this, is opening yourself up to all the knowing that's available to you.
Yeah, I'm thinking the person from the blue planet, I just realized I think her father might have been with her in this life, her father from the blue planet, or that's my sense.
I found that many people who came from the different planet, kind of soul, tend to be lonely here. And I have many clients who came to do the session to find out their soulmate, because they feel like they've never met, and they never had one in their life. And then many times they find out that they are from very, very different places. But when they meet their soulmate or soul group, that experience is really like, even as a facilitator, I can feel how joyful and loving and everything that this person never experienced on this planet Earth. That is very beautiful. Yeah. So I want to say that if someone who feels like that right now, that never had a soulmate or soul group people, that might be the reason why.
That's a good point, because people who come in wanting to meet their soulmate, feeling lonely, I'm recalling somebody, and it was very clear, their guides and the council were stressing that it was very important for them to be independent during this lifetime, to experience things as an independent being. So sometimes we're just meant to really figure it out on our own as much as possible. And it isn't, yes, it can be lonely sometimes, but I think if you're able to retrieve an understanding of your purpose, it fills that longing of wanting to connect with somebody that perhaps you've incarnated with many, many times, and they're just not here on this one, on this ride. So
I'm going to look and see if there's any other questions. People asked about affiliate groups, or what did we call them? Clans, and the secondary groups. And then guides. And one person in particular asked, I just got it this morning, who is that was shoving me down the chute to come into this life? And I don't know that that's a soul group necessarily. It might be the workers in the place of life body selection, but it did jog my memory that I've found in my sessions, I don't know if you guys have found this too, that the soul group is often a place that is throughout the life between lives. Like I've had them meet them when they crossed over and we're dusting them off from a particularly rough life, kind of cleaning them. And then I've had people return, they go through the whole session, and then before they leave, they go back and visit the soul group again. Or they even are there kind of waving, sending them off at the end. So it feels like they kind of sometimes can make multiple appearances. I don't know, what is your guys' thoughts?
Yeah.
I think connection with the soul group during a journey, during an LBL journey, varies depending upon what your intentions are and what you want to know. And sometimes your intentions don't lead you to be working with your soul group or discovering your soul group. You know, it's you come to ask a question or find out about something like self-love, and it just doesn't lead in that direction. However, if you are looking, if you have that longing, that sense of where is my soulmate? There's no one in my life who is filling that. You may end up finding out that you are here to learn about loving yourself, and that when you do, love appears in your life because you are loving and putting out the energy to attract love into your life. It's not about getting it from the outside. It's about putting your energy out and filling your life with love, which can attract others into your life. And so it's reframing and shifting the priorities. I think the soul group can be very interactive, just like Vondie is explaining in a session, depending upon what the person is looking for and what they need. And sometimes you have, parents and children and grandparents and some very advanced souls in the soul group who are wanting to share and wanting to take this opportunity to provide learning. And I do find that happens. There are things that as long as you're here, we want to tell you, about this. And sometimes they're very active and sometimes they're not. So it isn't really an indication of the soul group itself. It's more, I find, about the intention of the journey that can dictate how the soul group appears and manifests. Whether it's about us if they come in looking like people. You know, it's just like the council. And if they look like people and are wearing, you know, Michael talks about this, wearing robes and medals and everything, why are they, I always ask, why are they manifesting this way? What is the reason for this? Yes. And they will always explain, you know, well, you know, you have this thing about old white guys, and we wanted to kind of shake you up and, you know, poke at you about your issue about patriarchal behavior. And so sometimes the council can be jokers too, you know, they're really wanting you to be open and available and to notice where you have short-sightedness at times. So
when you said sometimes they can get answers in the council, recently had a session where there were a lot of questions about the person's relationships in this life. And so they ended up getting all their answers in the soul group. Like, I can't remember how it came about, but I think I said, could this soul, because the soul started giving them information. And I said, would this be a good place to ask their questions? And so we started saying, you know, why is this relationship troubled? Why are they struggling here? And that particular, I don't even think it was a guide. I just think it was someone in the group they were very connected to. I don't remember if we even identified them as a soulmate, but just a soul that had a lot of information, almost like a big brother or something. And they were able to answer most of the person's questions about their relationships.
I find that during an LBL, you have multiple opportunities to ask questions that you might ask in your soul group and to your guide, and then ask it again in your council. And it's like people with different points of view are giving you different views of the question and the answer. I find that can be very useful because the soul group may give them something that they relate to. The council may be giving them something that's much more ethereal, that's out there. You know, it's like, but the soul group or the guide can give a very down-to-earth answer that is much more what they're looking for.
I'd like to build on that. The fact is, someone may get all the answers that they were seeking from going before the council or at the initial meeting of a guide. It's not always, it doesn't mean you always go to these places, to the soul groups. It doesn't mean that you're not in a soul group if you don't go there. It's just understanding if you're coming with a set of questions that you want to inquire about, insights that you're wishing to retrieve, and whatever your higher self with your facilitator helps to guide you into is going to give you what you need at that time. So some people may come in with a set agenda that they want to go here and here and here. And you may try, as facilitators, we try to provide them with all of that. But perhaps that is not in the cards for them as far as what their guides and their higher self think that they need to experience.
So I think the only thing we haven't addressed that was in the questions was affiliate groups. Does anybody have anything they wanted to share about those?
I will just say that picture, someone, someone I was thinking of just now, she was an artist and she drew a picture, and it was her group, small group. I think there was 6 people in her soul group, but she could see all these other cells of groups, soul, like different colors, different like vibrating at different rates. It was amazing for her to have those perceptions and then be able to relay them and draw a little bit. And then she would always, there were, I can't even remember, several cells, then a larger one around that, then some over here, and so the same repeated over and over, then a larger circle and a larger circle. And it was fascinating. It was fascinating. So I think there's just, everybody will have a different perception about how these soul groups are set out, I believe. and understanding that we might contract to work with one way over here, or different. Look at us, how we incarnate in different countries and different continents and different civilizations. It's just a marvel.
Great, thank you. I'm just going to look and see if there's anything else that people asked that we didn't cover. We included a little bit about guides. I think I'm just looking at, I have my notes taped behind my camera, my cheat sheet. I think we got most of the questions. And I just wanted to say, well, actually, before I wrap up, anything else anybody would like to contribute that we didn't cover, or you just would like to share or say before we wrap up? No? Okay.
I just like to say that don't doubt your experience and what you experienced during a journey, and don't set your journey out to follow a certain path that you've read about, because yours is going to be how you and other souls have arranged your contracts and your agreements. And it could look very different from one that's described in the book, even if it is, the story is on the same thing that your inquiry is about. So don't necessarily base your experience on, oh, well, it should look like this, because you made agreements. I mean, as Claudia is saying, souls make agreements with other souls who are doing similar journeys, and that you come together with another soul because it makes sense the two of you are working together on this particular lesson. And they could be, remote to you, or they could be someone that you've gone around with a lot. A soul does not necessarily need to be in your soul group if we start from the premise that a soul group comes together because your souls start at the same time. That's the basic soul group. That's where your basic organization starts from. So we start to have affinities with other souls that we meet along the way and then develop paths with. Our soul group, our close-in soul group, and the people that we incarnate with most are those that we've had repeat journeys with, that we've had repeat lessons with, and that we develop relationship with. Mm-hmm. And so they tend to be our close-in soul group, as opposed to all of the other souls that we've encountered throughout our many lifetimes. So you could have many people involved in your life who are not in your soul group. And usually when we do a past life, we ask, who is this in the current life? Is this someone in your current life? And sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. And you begin to learn, well, no, not in this life, but they were in that last life we went to. So, mm-hmm. And you learn where you connect and how your soul group ultimately emerges as that core, that little pod that and travel with most frequently. So there's no prescription for it. There's no requirement. This is free will of souls to work together on their work and choosing other souls to work with in their journeys.
Great. Thank you, Diana. Anybody else? Well, we just wanted to say thank you for your questions and your comments, and feel free to post more questions and comments, and we'll be happy to chime in. So I think that's it for us for today. Thank you, Diana and Claudia and Sakura, for being here with me, and bye for now.